Psalm 119, verses 97 to 104. Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day. Your commandment makes me wiser than my enemies, for it is ever with me. I have more understanding than all my teachers, for your testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the aged, for I keep your precepts. I hold back my feet from every evil way in order to keep your word. I do not turn aside from your rules, for you have taught me. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Through your precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way.
Welcome to the Neighborhood Church Revive podcast. We are so glad that you're joining us today as we unpack big ideas about God's Word together. My name is Shawn Thomas. I'm an associate campus pastor here at Neighborhood Church, and we believe that God's Word is relevant and helpful even for today, which is why we take time to unpack what it says and talk with you guys, with the pastors here. And today, as always, I feel like I always say it's a special day, but it is special because it's just Pastor Justin and me in here mixing it up.
I know. We're holding the fort down.
Yeah.
Everyone else is suffering for Jesus at camp, like
That's right.
at Hume Lake, stunning, and we're in the concrete jungle. I don't know.
Yeah.
Concrete suburbia jungle.
Yeah, suburbia.
I don't know
and
what it
the
is.
throes of urban living here in Cypress,
Yeah.
California.
Yeah, but they're all up at camp, so.
Yeah. Any news from them? Have you heard?
They got there. I got some notification from Hume Lake.
Good. Yeah.
Your camper has arrived, because I have two kids up there. So
Yeah.
So I heard that. So I guess no news is good news, right?
That's true. Yeah,
so-
they're diving in and doing their thing.
Yeah, so it's always great. Hume Lake is amazing, and I'm excited for our kids. And, Mike will be there on Sunday at Cypress, and I don't know if John and Lorraine, I think they'll be there, but they might be zombies by then.
Totally
Because it's a
exhausted.
lot of work for all those counselors and certainly the staff. So, for anyone listening, before Friday or Saturday, even be praying, not just for their safe travel, but for good things, because great things happen there. Sometimes lives are constantly changed. Sometimes it's dealing with tough stuff. Sometimes it's just a joyous thing. So just be praying for them. And
that's a good
I
word.
anticipate good stuff.
Yeah. And for those of you listening who don't know what Hume Lake or what we're talking about, every year there's a summer camp that our church goes to for kids, for youth. I think it's like elementary to high school or through high school.
Third through 12th, 11th graders going into 12th.
Okay,
So, but they're three different camps, so you don't have to worry about your third grader being stuck with seniors
like
in
a
high school.
17-year-old or something.
there's
Yeah,
three
they've
different camps,
divided up.
elementary, middle school, and high school.
Yeah, and not only our church, but I think a ton of churches throughout the summer. I think most Southern or California churches, because Hume Lake, it's more central-ish. I mean, it's a good 2-3 hour drive.
At least. I think it's 5 or 6. It's in Sequoia National Park.
Sequoia.
Yeah.
So, and it's beautiful up there. You've been, Justin?
I've been there a couple times.
I have too, for just different things, and it's kind of like the Christian youth mecca, if you will.
It really is.
Just
at
to
least
be
on the West Coast for sure.
silly about it.
Yeah, we went there the first year. We went there when my daughter was in like 4th grade maybe.
Wow.
And so we're nervous about how she's going to do.
Yeah.
'Cause she'd never been away from home that long. So we actually rented a cabin outside, but they keep the kids locked down so no one can keep very safe. So we didn't hear from her for a week. We heard it from a couple counselors that she's doing great. So she didn't think twice about us. So it's perfect.
Yeah. Mission accomplished.
Well done stuff there. So.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, as for our conversation today, so this past Sunday, we were back in our Psalm series, but kind of. It happened to be Father's Day. It was June 19th, which was Father's Day celebrated, but also June 19th is Juneteenth, which is a relatively new federal holiday. Well, a new federal holiday, I guess, the last year or two. Yeah. And Justin, you spoke to that quite eloquently, I thought. And so there was a few things that we were talking about at the service. However, the main passage was from what you guys heard Justin read a moment ago from Psalm 119, 97 through 104, which had a lot in there as well about kind of the law. I love your law, but I'm going to hate everything else. And it's like, this is kind of charged, like usual for Psalms, charged language.
Yeah. No, and it was I think a fitting passage for Father's Day. I think Mother's Day, I don't remember what we covered on Mother's Day, but I don't think we did a psalm. I think I did a psalm, but not from this series. I did Psalm 139. I think Mike did like Psalm 100.
That's
so
right,
we were outside of the series that we're in, even though we were in Psalms. But it seemed like a fitting one. We're doing Psalms 90, 107 to 119, I think, this summer. And so this one fits in that. But it seemed fitting with a lot of us are grateful for the guidance our fathers give us. And so, it just seemed like a small jump to go from Father's Day to here's how the Word guides us and helps us to live well. And, we're grateful for dads who help us live well. And we also know, especially on Mother's Day and Father's Day, there's that, there's some whose parents didn't, raise them well. Not that they raised them poorly, but they were abusive or absent or whatever. And so these are always a reminder, as hard as that is, that there's also God's also pouring into you, and He's there to fill in those places where others may have failed. And He gives us a church also to fill in some of those places. Yeah, as well. We didn't talk about that much, but it's always worth addressing. The day can be very hard for some. So.
And it is Father's Day is kind of one of those days where you may or may not, like Mother's Day, kind of see new folks or people kind of like, what is church? Maybe we go to this, So that's also an opportunity, I think, good to speak into the breadth of experience that people might have. Well, speaking of Father's Day, Justin, do you have any fatherly wisdom that you've given to your kids or that you've received in the past that you can enlighten us to on our podcast?
Oh, I'm not sure. The one I shared in service just was, and just kind of funny, but my dad always said, this is not deep life stuff. It's just something that pops to mind. Is that regarding the gas tank? If you take care of the top half, the bottom half takes care of itself. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't get it for a while. And he's like, just don't get caught with no gas was the point. So, nice. But so that's one. And what's funny is when I'll go home to Washington and I'll borrow my dad's car, it's often very low on gas. And I'm like, hey, you aren't practicing what you preach.
Wait a second. Come on. Where's this top half talk going?
I don't know that I have anything pithy that I can think of. But honestly, seriously, like one of the things I think of as a parent, and I don't say this as a pitch as a pastor, but how critical the church is in raising my children. Not that they do it for me, but that it's a place where my kids can come and be loved, and maybe if there's things they don't want to talk to their parents about, but they'll talk to someone else, like youth staff or whatever, who is reinforcing the same things we believe.
The same values.
But a different voice, but the same values. And so that's, I think, for those who are out there, just get into the church body as much as you can, and get in those relationships because and get into them as early as possible. But that's been wonderful for us, because there's times where kids just we have good relationships with our kids. It's never like World War III, but they're also our kids, and there's things they just don't talk about with us. But we can talk to their youth leader, never like in the sense of give me the dirt. It's just simply, are they doing okay? Because I can't tell, and they'll say, they're doing great. It has been the general report, and so that's been good to get through, especially the teen years, where information is sparse. And so that's been a helpful thing for our parental sanity. And knowing that they have a handful of people who love them, not just us when it's too weird to talk to mom or dad about. So,
and that's important, I think. And you mentioned information. That made me think we're in the information age. And there's so many voices speaking into kids today. So that's a really good reminder of the importance of having our kids in environments where, because so many people, so many avenues of information coming to our kids, and if we can kind of create opportunities for other positive, good people or institutions to speak into them, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's hard to prioritize, because not just is there all kinds of information, there's all kinds of activities. Like, we are a very active family. We probably didn't fight that fight well in terms of, prioritizing church. We did, because I'm a pastor, right? So we're always there. So they're there, but they start performing at high levels in their activities, and there's a lot less regard for Sunday morning than there used to be of keeping that sacred. And so I'm thankful that we've had coaches that get it, that we're Christians. So they miss an occasional Sunday for games, but we also tell the coach we aren't scrimmaging on Sundays. Like,
Yeah.
you can house for a game that's scheduled by the league, but besides that,
but if it's just
So and some of them are like, well, no, I go to church too, so I don't schedule anything on Sunday morning. So there's a lot that's working against us, and so it's great to have a church body to work together on. I think is probably the biggest thing for me.
Well, that it kind of segue the talk of fatherly wisdom and things like that. One of the things that struck me about the message from Sunday, and you kind of called it out, was it's interesting in verse 98 and 99. The speaker in the psalm is talking about that I have more insight than my teachers, or more understanding than my elders. That odd kind of culturally, where teachers and elders are in the highest esteem, and they're the ones that you're getting your knowledge from, or you're getting your learning and experience. But it's like when we lean on the law of God, when we kind of look to Him and His statutes, that supersedes it. And it was kind of interesting. It's like, oh wow, and ideally our earthly fathers, and like you said, I mean, people have different experiences with their earthly fathers. Ideally, they would be teaching us in the way of the Lord, passing it on to their kids. We would pass it on to our kids, and etc.
Yeah. And even then, we're not going to do that perfectly, So
that's true. Yeah,
so that's
it might
all
be
the
a
more
misapplication.
All the more reason for us to ground them in the Word above all else, so that they can have that firsthand knowledge, because that's also critical as well. Raising teenagers, at some point, it's you tell them what to do for a while, and then at some point, it's like, okay, well, you got to decide what your faith is going to be at this point, and make the decision that you need to make. And so, for
folks who are listening to the podcast who might have kids, or have teenagers, or have friends who have kids, or whatever it might be, is there any? Because that is a hard kind of letting go sometimes when our kids are becoming teenagers. And I don't have kids, but I've worked with a lot of kids, and there's that turn where it's wonderful and beautiful to see, you like your little toddler become a little, adolescent, middle, or not even middle school, but like an elementary kid running around being crazy. But then they start developing, like this autonomy of like, oh, now I have my own ideas. I have my own ways that I feel about stuff. And then, kind of with different hormones, there could be tension.
Right.
Any advice or any experience that you have had with kind of like that release of like, hey, kids, like there's some things that you're going to explore on your own, and I'm going to let you do that. But then when to bring in the guardrails or the boundaries.
Yeah, I think I wish I was I wish I had some good principles. I think I kind of parent more by intuition and kind of taking things as they come, and having a foundation in the Bible. But I don't know that I have necessarily a formula for that. The things that I can think of is, we try to keep the conversation open, and I'm not at all exaggerating with what I already said of like, I really rely on the church. Like they've got to have a good reason not to go. Like, and we're not unreasonable either. We like, okay, you had a choir show for your school, and we want them to be part of their different communities they're in, to be a light there. So you had the show that went till 11, then you guys had to clean up, and then you had the after party, so you didn't get home till 1:30 or 2. You can sleep in today. It's okay. So we tried to be, there was an expectation, but it wasn't so rigid that they hated church. So I think really that's been what we've relied on is the church, and then certainly giving guidance, and some of it is remembering that they're kids, and remembering that you were like as a kid, where you weren't always reasonable or rational, and the hormones, and so sometimes they're cranky, and sometimes you need to be like, you need to put an end to it and like make sure they're respectful, and other times you just got to let it roll off. So and I don't know how where the balance in that is, but I think there is a little bit of that, and the teenage years are, and we're in different phases with all of them. One of them's, I've got a freshman in college going into sophomore year, and at that point it's kind of, we're more of counselors than being super directive, and hey, think about this, think about that, and trusting that the foundation's been laid from which the reasoning can happen from there, and trusting the Holy Spirit for the rest. And another one's going to be a senior in high school, and another one's going to be a freshman in high school. So just navigating the various
the breadth
hormones.
Of the added teenage, young adult life.
The angst. So
yeah, man. Well, I was going to say, speaking of angst, but there's always angst in the Bible, with depending on the passage that you're in. Was there anything in this passage that you preached on today that was like, man, this was just so rich, or you felt like when you were given the message, it's like, man, you guys, this is like the big moment of the message?
I think I called mine, I don't remember the exact title, but basically how ordinary steps can lead to an extraordinary life. And you read this passage and there's nothing particularly extraordinary on the face of it, except for when you say that I have more insight than my teachers or more understanding than my elders. That's, to us, that's a teenage rite of passage, thinking you're what's the Mark Twain thing, kids move out while you still know everything, or no, that wasn't him. That's a bumper sticker. Twain's thing is like something to the effect of, when I was a teenager, whatever he used, my old man was so ignorant I could hardly stand him. And then after I had gone away and come back for a few years, I was surprised at how much he'd learned. So
that's awesome.
Something like that. I butchered it. Maybe you can find the right one.
Yeah, and we'll link to it. Yeah.
Or it could be someone else, but it seems Twainish. It's clever. So I even forgot what I was talking about. So it's kind of a rite of a passage where we even those who respect their elders, I don't think respect their elders like the ancient world respected elders, Totally. And so for him to say that I have more understanding than the elders, that was extraordinary to me. So what's happening here? And really that was, I think those two verses to me were very interesting, because I'm like, how could that be? How could they say that without kind of being a little arrogant,
Totally, yeah.
And the two possibilities for both of them, and I think one's on one and one's the other, is that the teachers, and we can even see this as we study different scholars, as we prepare, some of them sometimes get too smart for the Bible in their own minds, right? Like they're like, oh, this is good, but they start undermining, like the author may or may not be this person, or, and so I think with the more insight than the teachers, that comes from the fact that the psalmist is fixated on the scriptures, and that doesn't, and that is the ultimate authority. So now that doesn't mean when the scriptures say like the four corners of the earth that we believe in a flat earth, like it's not to that extent, but that, we want to learn and broadly, and, you're immersed in art and you want your faith in the scriptures to inform that, to give you a fuller vision of God's view of art, not just humanity's, and we want that with everything we do because, he created it all. So, but I think with that is the teachers are, they meditate on the scriptures, or maybe they just teach what they know, but it isn't filtered into their life where they're constantly just consumed with it. And so the psalmist says, I've surpassed them in that. I'm consumed by the word. And then with the elders, it says, I have more understanding, for I obey your precepts. So the elders might know a lot, but they aren't doing much, at least in at least the ones he's talking about. Probably not all of them. And not just because they're old and tired not doing it, they're not obeying, it sounds like. And so so there's more to knowledge than just knowing the stuff in our heads, but what are we actually doing with it? And that's a huge challenge for all of us, to not just be hearers but doers. So. Yeah,
and I mean, there's a life lesson in that, even in and of itself. Is, going back to talking about teenagers or people, or when you're growing up, it's like, there's the practical learn knowledge. I think of there's that famous monologue from Goodwill Hunting. If you know,
it's
that,
a long time ago. I don't remember.
Well, for those of you listening on the podcast, if you like apples, how do you like them?
Okay.
Apples?
That was the only one I remember.
That's the only one. No, but there's a scene where Robin Williams is talking to Matt Damon's character, and Matt Damon is this child prodigy and everything like that, and kind of is really,
it's wicked smart.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna get a lot of Bostonian coverage coming up here, but yeah, like, and he's kind of like, too big for his britches, But Robin Williams, he's middle aged or whatever in the movie, and he's kind of speaking into that, like, hey, until you've really lived life, try not to be the know-it-all, Yeah, and that really feeds into it, and like if you live in the scriptures, if you're experiencing and living out a biblical, not only biblical theology, but just having that inform your life, then it's like, okay, then you're getting it. Then you're seeing with, through the lens that God would have us interact with the world, and then that's a good way to do life, basically.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good word. And I think too, like, I felt like I even made a caveat, or I paused in my sermon because I'm like, I do love teenagers. Like, I use that as an example because it's an age where you're kind of figuring things out and finding boundaries and thinking what you think of things. Yeah. So I was like, in some ways I seemed negative on that. So I made sure I covered myself on that not at all. Like, because in a lot of ways I think, even we're going on a mission trip to Greece, to the Island of Lesbos, in 10 days from when we're recording. And one of the things I told my daughters, long story, but we have funds in a mission fund that we had raised years ago. COVID shut the other trip down. So I'm like, I didn't really give her a choice. I'm like, we raised it, you're coming, even if you don't want to. Yeah. And the reason was, I'm like, you're a freshman in college. You're going to be a sophomore if you don't go this year. Yeah. Who knows what kind of internships, what kind of things are going to develop, where this is a unique opportunity you have right now, and to do something that you may not do in the future. And I think with teenagers, there's, I've kind of talked about the, I don't know, you're developing, and sometimes that's rough, but there's also an amazing faith. Like, there is a,
unbridled passion and zeal.
There's a passion, a zeal. Well, Jesus said, do it. Okay. I'm going to tell my friend about Jesus then, like those things that we end up rationalizing our way out of, or outgrowing, which we shouldn't outgrow for a lot of us. So there's a lot to learn, all along the spectrum there. I think, we had one family on Sunday that had teenagers, but they're just kind of, they've started coming back on and off. So, but the rest of our teenage bench was decimated on Sunday, and we felt it. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm. We had a lot of donuts left over on Sunday because
some of our international students had gone back home,
all our international students are gone. Another family was
dangerous
traveling.
for me because I'm like, oh, donuts, cleanup crew. Oh, this is my language right now.
Yeah, my family. I don't know where they were, but. Oh yeah, because they were at camp. Yeah, so all the kids were at camp. Yeah, and then my eldest works at another church, so we were like, we had no teenagers. Like, well, we had a few from a newer family. So it was, and you miss that. Like, there's a definite energy. So all that to say, I love teenagers, despite some of what I've said. That this is the process we all recognize.
We value all walks and stages of life here at Neighborhood Church. Just to affirm that
absolutely.
Well, yeah, man. And it's, just to kind of keep the conversation going, you mentioned, Justin, that's, your mission trip coming up. For those listening, Justin and his family, and then Mike McKay and a few others are going to have a trip to Greece, the island of Lesbos. Yeah. We also had a trip recently come back from Cuba. Yeah. And so we're kind of, coming out of the pandemic and kind of like, hey, let's all hands on deck. We're going to make it work. I think these trips, though, are a little more discovery oriented because we haven't actually done ministry in these areas yet.
Well, Cuba we have.
Oh,
so
really?
Cuba was not an exploratory trip. We go with one of our missionaries, Bruce Camp, and he goes there fairly regularly. And it's great ministry. They had a lot of hiccups this time around.
I heard.
He runs a COVID, some luggage that never came. I have not heard details. I just heard that things didn't all go as planned, but still great ministry happened, as it always does. That's one of the things with every group I lead. It was the first missions training I ever went on, like 2001 maybe, where they taught us a phrase that everyone memorizes for the mission trip is, that's just the way I like it. So if you lose your luggage, that's just the way I like it. Okay. You get something terrible to eat, that's just the way I like it, and you roll with it. So nice. So I'm sure, I know, and there are a lot of experienced folks on that team, so I'm sure they did really well. Yeah, and I'm excited about our trip. It's exploratory. We are going to a refugee camp on the island of Lesbos, which is, we've not done that before. This is through some of our ministry partners who are working on basically a comprehensive refugee ministry, both ministering to immigrants locally here in Southern California, and then all the way to across the ocean. So, and they had gone to Lesbos a couple years ago, and they said it was amazing. So I thought, okay, well, let's kind of dip our toe in there. And what I love about this trip is we'll get that experience there, but also there's so many opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening at the border now where we can, regardless of where you stand politically, you still to love your neighbor and to care for them. So to minister there as faithfully as we can, if that's what someone chooses. Like, there's tons of options, basically, locally for people to say, man, that really touched my heart. Not when can I raise funds to go again, but oh, I can do something like this locally. Obviously, it'll be different, but but yeah, really excited about the opportunity there. There's a hospitality house that is, I don't know, a mile from the camp, and a lot of the women there, if they don't have a man to protect them, they're very vulnerable. And so they, this hospitality house is specifically for women. They can come, take a shower safely, do laundry, let their kids play, relax, kind of put their guard down for a little bit. So that's what we have, 7 women and 3 men on the team. So the women will be doing that. Mike McKay, our lead pastor, and my son will be running the thrift shop. So we'll be stocking and setting that up and helping
out
there.
The cool deals.
They also have a wood shop. So they're and they take pallets and they make chairs and tables. And so I'm like, well, how good can that be? So I'm like, yeah, maybe we can do that. And then they showed me what they made. There's no way I can do that. Like, it's I'd buy that.
Master old world craftsman.
It was really good looking stuff. So I'm like, okay, we might try, but I'm not banking on us being able to do that unless it's, but it's very relational ministry. Most of the refugees are from Somalia and Afghanistan. And so we get a chance to, there's huge language barriers. There's, it's not a real opportunity to share the gospel in word, but it's a tremendous opportunity indeed. And we have our testimonies ready to share our testimonies so that we can tell them we're here because Jesus loves you and we do too. And we want to help for this season. So we're real excited about that. We'll be doing that for a week, and it should be great. So,
and that's there's nothing like mission trips. For those of you listening, if you've done them or are thinking about them, I'm a big advocate. There's a lot of talk about kind of Justin and I nerd out a lot on like theology or like just social things. And there's been a lot of talk, especially in the last probably 20 years or so, about the kind of the structure of missions, kind of what they do. Short-term missions specifically have been maybe kind of criticized in the last 20 years or so, just about
vacationaries.
Vacation, yes. Yeah. And I get that. I was telling a friend of mine the other day that the last mission that I went to, so I do. I've done work in Spain with this organization that's great, and I encourage people to support it if they feel led to. But like I had some funds set away too, and I'm like, I'm going to put out my letters, just to let people know. But it's like a lot of this, I'm just going to muscle this one, because it's like on the Mediterranean coast, amazing, But I mean, places like if you think Greece, you see these beautiful pictures. I'm sure if you're on an island, it's going to be amazing. But it's like, but there's still a refugee camp here, and it might look beautiful, in like the classical terms of white beaches and blue oceans. But it's like, there's people suffering and who were ousted from their home. Right. Those people are everywhere. I mean, you even spoke to Southern California. You go down the street and there's people trying to make a living and trying not to be seen, and it's like they need to be loved too. So what do you do with that in any sort of environment? It's
no, I think I love short-term missions as well. And I don't know, I think in a lot of ways we have to remember that we're dealing with people and transforming hearts. So it's not efficient, like, you know, in the sense of,
I'm going to go build a well.
Yeah. I mean, even that's great, but in the sense of like, it's expensive. Like if we were just transferring money around, there's probably more efficient ways to spend money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what happens in the hearts of those who go, and hopefully the encouragement that happens for either the missionaries we go to serve with, and certainly the people we serve, like that, that matters. And I don't know how to put a price tag on that. So honestly, the missionaries that we've sent from our church, we have several, and all of them went on short-term mission trips.
Yeah, who are on the field full time.
That are on the field full time.
They had experienced
that. And all of them point to short-term missions being a critical point of decision for them. And so, so that's so I'm excited to do that, and you know, want to build a pipeline of missionaries again, if that's what God desires. And so, and I love that there's a local application of it too. So
totally,
that there can be for those whose hearts are touched. So
well, awesome, Justin. Well, I want to wrap up our time for those listening, and for your time also, as we got to keep the fort going down here. This is the skeleton crew.
Got to hold it down.
Any closing thoughts or final thoughts on our passage or missions or whatever it might be? Father's Day.
You know what? I don't. I just encourage people along the lines of Psalm 119, and I think I do this probably half the time when you ask me for my closing thought, is to just get in the scriptures and study them, because I mean, I read through the Bible every year, like cover to cover. That's part of my personal time with the Lord. And and sometimes because I'm going through so much, there's times like, I don't remember this story, and I've been doing it for 20 years. Like I've been through the Bible lots of times, and there's always surprises. And then when you actually dig in to the scriptures like this one, and the gems you find in there are just so valuable. So I encourage people. I mean, Psalm 119 is one of those where I kind of catch my breath and like, all right, here we go. You know, and I read through it, but it's just so rich. That's about it. I don't know.
Well, that's good.
I'm kind of a broken record on that one.
Well, maybe it might be helpful. Do you do read through the Bible in a year program, or do you just kind of do your own program that you made up, or could you recommend something?
Yeah, I do. I think I'll have you put the link, but it's the Discipleship Journal, an old defunct magazine that had a read through the Bible in the year, and it has 4 different columns. And Shawn will put a link on that, right? But it has 4 different columns, and one of them is Old Testament history, one of them Old Testament wisdom, one of them is Gospels. I'm not sure if it's Gospels and Acts or just Gospels, and then the next one is the rest of the New Testament. So you have 4 columns. So if you didn't want to read through that fast, you could do 1 column of Old Testament, 1 column of New, and it has 25 readings a month because everyone misses occasionally.
Oh, nice.
And so it's built into to really be, kind of scalable to what you want to do, and it has boxes to check, which is very.
Oh,
that always feels good. Yeah. And I think it's a NavPress product now, but
cool.
That's what I use, and it's super helpful. So
sweet. Awesome. Well, great. It'd be super helpful for, I know, our folks listening, anybody who wants to jump into that. But as always, we love doing this podcast, just 1, that we get to hang out together and talk as a staff, but 2, that we get to kind of have some sort of conversation with you, our community, our listeners. So we really appreciate that you guys are hearing and listening to this. But we encourage you, please send this to a friend if you think it would be encouraging to them or eye-opening or whatever it might be. You can find us on YouTube. This podcast we post on our channels. Both of those channels are Neighborhood Church of Cypress and Neighborhood Church of Los Alamitos. You can search those on YouTube, and we are there. Also on Facebook and on Instagram under those same handles. And we would love to hear from you guys. Please email us with any comments or questions that you have at connect@neighborhoodchurch.com. Again, that's CONNECT@neighborhoodchurch.com. Until next time, we're praying that God revives your soul. Take care.